Are those iconic solos worked out, or are they improvised? This is a big question I've often thought about, but which I've never seen addressed. Are the iconic solos on the albums we all know, love and attempt to play ourselves worked out in advance, or are they just off-the-cuff improvisation? Or are they a bit of both? The kinds of solos I'm talking about are those which are pure lead guitar, using and interpreting standard blues licks and phrases. This obviously applies to any rock and blues solo, but it's something I've thought about with the players whose work I know best: Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page and Mick Taylor. And in this video I'll just talk about Eric Clapton in the Blues Breakers and Cream period of his career, 1965 to 1968. Eric's work on the Beano album, or to give it its correct title, Blues Breakers, John Mayall with Eric Clapton, is by any standard stunning and groundbreaking. Anyone of a certain age will recall spinning the vinyl and lifting the needle on and off the record in an attempt to work out what Eric was playing. Back then, you had to have a lot of patience, and if you were lucky, your record player gave you the option to play a disc at 16 2/3 RPM. That enabled you to slow an album track down by 50%. But the problem was that it also dropped the pitch, so you would have to take that into account when working out what to play. I remember that back in the day, I used to think that virtually all rock and blues solos were improvised. And I was surprised when my fellow guitarist in a band I had just joined asked me if I had written a solo for a certain song we would be playing. Prior to that, in my previous bands, I would certainly have a few stock phrases, but I would just make the solo up as I went along. Having spent a lot of hours working out famous solos for this channel, a lot of them having quite difficult fingering patterns and picking techniques, I find it almost impossible to believe that some of the famous solos and licks we look at here were just played off the cuff. They are just too good. I do want to make it clear that my saying this takes nothing whatsoever away from the brilliance of these musical statements. But could something like this lick from Stepping Out, for example, be played without having been carefully worked out in advance? I think the only track that doesn't feature a pre-planned or partially written solo on the Beano album is probably Have You Heard? It is an absolute blazing powerhouse of a solo, but it isn't flawless, and it does have moments which sound to me like Eric is figuring out where to go next. And given that the Blues Breakers live recording of Stormy Monday was being taped as part of a whole set at the Flamingo Club on the 17th of March 1966, for a planned live album release, I think that that too might have been at the very least mapped out in some detail beforehand. Perhaps the best examples of this approach would be the two iconic solos in Crossroads. These stunning lead breaks are arguably two of the all-time best up-tempo blues solos. Were they just played off the cuff at the Fillmore on March the 10th, 1968? Or were they mapped out or even almost fully written in advance, specially to be recorded for a live album? The solos contain phrasing and playing of such virtuosity that to my mind it is inconceivable that they were improvised. And there are some techniques in the solos that would surely have to be practiced. I believe he crafted those two supreme musical statements to play just once for the live recording. He knew he was setting those statements down for history. In support of this theory, or to consider it, it's worth comparing the solos to those in the several live recordings of Crossroads from the farewell tour later that year, 1968. There is certainly some very competent and interesting playing, but none of it comes even close to the polished excellence of the Wheels of Fire recording. To coincide with the making of this video, I have started the long process of tabbing out the two Crossroads solos for my Patreon supporters. And the tab for the first lesson, which covers the first 7 phrases of the first solo, is now available over on my Patreon page, a link to which you will find below. Please let me know what you think. Were these iconic early Slowhand solos mapped out or even fully written in advance to be played just once, or were they pure improvisation? What do you think? Thanks for watching. Cheers for now.